I'm going to list 6 sinister signs from least important to most important that the person you're dating or hoping to date is in the process of erasing you from their life forever. Let's start with sign number 1, their inability to take an interest in your life. Now, in the past, I've been very famous for telling people that it doesn't really matter who reaches out to who first. What matters more so is how enjoyable the conversation is and who ends the conversation first. But I'd like to challenge my own assumption there. Now, my way of looking at the beginning stages of dating in general is a little unique. I prefer to think of every interaction you have with someone as an important data set. So who reaches out to who first is one small data point that, in my opinion, is easily overshadowed by 2 more important data points: how enjoyable the conversation was and who ended the conversation first. All right. But what happens if you're dating someone who doesn't initiate or reach out at all, takes no interest in what's going on in your life? When they do respond to you, they take ages to get back to you, and they give you short responses. Basically, they're doing nothing to encourage any type of conversation with you. What then? Well, to use our boring scientific approach, that's a lot of negative data points. It's not good. But perhaps the more worrying trend is that all of these negative data points have something in common. They all deal with indifference. Look at this. This is the graphic I put together for you at the beginning of the video. Now, here's where we are here. And the rest, well, spoiler alert, the one commonality that you're going to see amongst all 6 of these signs is indifference. Your partner isn't going to care about you. And with that in mind, let's move on to the second sign. Sign number 2, they say the right things but feel disconnected. Making these videos seems kind of simple. I mean, the premise is find signs that the person you're dating or with wants to erase you from their life forever. But as I have so lovingly pointed out in the past, my fundamental problem with the dating industry in general is that most of the advice out there is surface level. Take this Google search, for example. I type in signs they are gone for good, and I get a list of things to look for that typically accompany an individual who is gone for good. Now, they are all technically true, but to me, they all lack something very important: actual human experience. I mean, it doesn't help that this list was literally generated by Google's AI, but the biggest challenge I face when crafting an entire video like this is I'm always thinking of ways on how to incorporate actual human experience into the video, because that's really where you learn the most. Now, sometimes I'll use interviews with experts, sometimes interviews with clients, sometimes personal experience. And sometimes, as you're out there prowling for a way to interject actual human experience into such a lifeless industry, you stumble across Reddit and something that teaches you something you hadn't considered before. And now we come to the point of this sign. I was prowling Reddit and I stumbled across this fun little post with 3,800 upvotes. Now, the post was essentially trying to answer this exact question of how do you know someone is gone for good? And the poster says, she stopped saying I love you in the same way. She'd only say it as a kind of joke. Like if I messed something up, it would be I love you, but look at how you made that bed. This is the actual human experience, the human touch that matters. This poster's, I'm assuming ex at this point, says all the right things. I love you, but there's a disconnected aspect to it. The example he gives, of course, is I love you, but look at how you made that bed. And this kind of thing can happen in all sorts of ways. They could give you a detached compliment that is technically the right thing to say, but ultimately rings out as hollow or robotic, as if they're just going through the motions. For instance, you look nice today, but it's said without making eye contact or showing any kind of genuine interest. I miss you, but I love it when you do this, but there's always a but at the end. What's that famous quote from Game of Thrones? Nothing someone says before the word but really counts. Well, let's stay on the Reddit human experience hype train here as we move on to our next sign. Sign number 3, they go out of their way to avoid you. Now this poster says, we slept on different sleep schedules and started to ignore each other. Now this is 100% going to come up again by the end of this video, but one of the theories that I like to talk a lot about is my theory on commitment. I actually did a whole video on it a few months ago. But the basic premise goes like this. There are 6 factors that every person mentally considers when they're deciding whether or not they should make a commitment to another person. Satisfaction, alternatives, investment scarcity, urgency, and of course, fear of loss. Now, not all of these factors are weighted equally, yet we know from research by Carol E. Rusbolt that investment is without a doubt the most important factor to consider when understanding why people remain in relationships. See, Rusbolt found that the investment model of commitment is a predictive psychological theory that aims to explain why people remain in relationships. So, if someone is in the process of trying to erase you from their life, you're going to start to see them investing less and less time with you. Specifically, you're going to be looking for every single excuse to avoid you as humanly possible. But absence alone doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't present with them. This is where that actual human experience factor comes into play. Take a look at that Reddit post again. Now, in addition to sleeping on different schedules and beginning to ignore one another, the poster would go on to say this about their ex. His face would drop subconsciously and a fake smile would kick in. Now, Carl Jung would talk a lot about this concept of a facade. It's basically an aspect of our personality that we present to the world as a way to protect our true selves and adapt to societal expectations. Now, this facade is essentially a mask constructed from social roles we play and the impressions we wish to make on others, and often hides the deeper, more authentic parts of our psyche from public view. So the Reddit poster says she shows up at his house and then walks in and his face would drop subconsciously and then he'd quickly catch it and come back and start giving a half-hearted smile. Well, she's getting a rare look behind the mask, behind the facade, the true self, before he'd put the mask back on. And I think there's a lesson in this. There's always hints if you look close enough. The problem is most people don't want to look close enough because looking close enough is followed by heartbreak. And then we have sign number 4. They don't care about making you feel better after they've hurt you. I've been talking a lot about narcissists lately on this channel. It seems to be like this crazy buzzword that generates a lot of clicks on YouTube. And the irony of it is that when you get a topic like narcissism to pop off, YouTube actually encourages you to do more of it. Look at this. Reflect on what's different about this video so that you can keep making content that engages viewers. So of course, you fall victim to it. You make more content about narcissists. And more content about narcissists leads to more comments on those videos about narcissists, which leads, of course, me to reading those comments. Which leaves me with this thought. Wait, everyone here seems to think that their exes are narcissists. Can that actually scientifically be true? Well, according to the Cleveland Clinic, between 0.5 and 5% of people in the US may have it. Keyword distinction there is may. And between 50 to 75% of the cases affect men or people assigned male at birth. It seems unlikely that every single person's ex is a narcissist. But then this got me thinking as well. How in the world are licensed professionals diagnosing individuals with narcissism? Well, according to healthdirect.gov, there's no specific test for NPD, but someone needs to have 5 of the following criteria. And then of course there's the 9 criteria. But what if someone only has 4 of the criteria? Does that mean they're almost a narcissist? Do we round up? Narcissism is actually a very difficult thing to diagnose. And I think it's difficult to diagnose because everyone, if they're honest with themselves, has narcissistic traits. I mean, who doesn't like admiration? Who doesn't envy others and want some of the stuff that they have? I feel like those are very human feelings to have. Now, why did I go on this ridiculous rant about narcissism? Because this sign, not even attempting to make someone feel better when you know you've hurt them, to me screams of a very narcissistic trait. It screams of a lack of empathy. But I think there's something deeper to it. So imagine for a moment that you have a job that you love. It pays relatively well and checks off all of your boxes. But as time wears on, your boss stops paying you so well. And it gets to the point where the boss just stops paying you altogether. Yet they're expecting you to come in and work for free. Would you care about that job anymore? Or Would you just show up and go through the motions? Like, what is the point? There's no end goal to accomplish. And I think that's how a lot of people feel in this circumstance. They have one foot in and one foot out. And because of that, when you get hurt, they feel like, what is the point of trying to make them feel better? I'm already halfway out the door, which again is a very narcissistic thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that the person who's doing this is a narcissist, but what it does mean is that they have a narcissistic trait. But this sort of ties into sign number 5. They avoid topics related to the future. Now, time is the most valuable resource in our world. It's the one thing that once it's spent, well, it can't be regained. No one wants to feel like time is passing through their fingers. As I've already alluded to, we always want to feel like there's more on the horizon, that there's more to look forward to. And so when you're faced with a relationship where you feel like you don't have a future with a person, it can actually feel agonizing to be in that relationship. And this is where things get interesting. Why not just leave a relationship like this? Why prolong their suffering and your suffering? Well, I think the answer likely lies in attachment theory, specifically with, you guessed it, avoidant individuals. Now, avoidant individuals, it kind of says it in the name, like to avoid, like everything, conflict, you name it. Now, a lot of time, I focus my time and efforts on pinpointing an avoidant individual's incessant need for independence, but that doesn't mean they like getting into arguments. In fact, many times being in a relationship that is perpetually doomed sort of feels safe for them because they get to avoid the argument, and they're also usually with someone who doesn't really want to argue back. Yet if you are one of these avoidant individuals and you know there is no future with your partner, what do you do when that partner brings up the future? Well, you tend to change the subject. You tend to ignore the future altogether. Or, my personal favorite, you deal with it tomorrow. Basically, you'll do anything to string that time along in limbo together for as long as humanly possible. But avoidant individuals also have a curse that lives on inside of them. Something our friends in Attached refer to as the Phantom X syndrome. And here we land on sign number 6. They're spending more time with an alternative than they are with you. Now, I've already established that if you look at who or what someone is investing their time with, it'll usually show you where someone's true loyalties lie. I got my start helping people through breakups. Do you want to guess what the number one fear is of someone who's going through a breakup? It's that their ex moves on to someone else, that they can be replaced. Want to know something even more interesting? Most of the time, when they end up getting replaced, the exes replace that partner while they're still with that partner. Here's how it typically works. This is you, and this is your partner. You've been dating for about maybe a year, but lately you've noticed that your partner's been really distant. Of course, these things happen in relationships. The honeymoon period's over, you're just settling into the daily grind with one another, but the real reason is a little more sinister. This is Haley, your partner. Works with her. Now, you're a pretty confident individual, so you've never really been threatened by Haley. And you shouldn't be. You're better looking, smarter, more cultured, whatever. But what Haley is to your partner is another alternative. A potential glimpse of what life could look like without you. Now, eventually your partner does this comparison between you and Haley, and you went out. You always had it in the bag. So your partner decides to stay. Now, remember, this is all happening in your partner's head. What no one seems to touch on in the dating industry is that people are constantly doing these comparisons. We're always looking for a better deal. And it turns out there are a lot of Haleys to compare yourself against. And all it takes is just one hit, one Haley that they can start imagining a better life with. And that's when they start to pull away. That's when they start to invest their time with the new Haley. And that's when they intend on breaking up with you, on erasing you from their life. But, and this is probably the most devious part, they don't actually break up with you yet. They wait until they are sure Haley is a sure thing. And that's why this trend exists. This is why so many of my clients find out that their exes have actually moved on to that person that they were talking to at work, while of course they were still together with my client. Okay, this is a negative video. I don't like negative videos. Really, what we're doing in this video is we're talking about endings, the end of a relationship. A person erasing you from their life altogether. All 6 of these signs, they hurt you. They keep you up at night. They cause you to weep. They cause you to get angry, to scream into a pillow, to scream into a car. But it's not the ending, really. It's all a matter of perspective. It might be the end right now, sure, but it could be a new beginning. You know what keeps me up at night? Missed opportunities. It's the paths not taken, the words left unsaid. Those are what haunt my dreams. Frank Sinatra had it right. The best revenge in life is massive success. Why not make whoever's making you feel this way, making you click on a video like this and worry and feel these things, regret it? Why not make erasing you the worst decision of their life? No, it's not going to be easy. You're still going to think about them from time to time. But you know what? Not as much as they're going to think about you if you succeed.